Alright, so as I mentioned, so it's a full implementation demo today, okay? And in today's session, we're going to be taking a look at a customer request application. And what we're going to be looking at today is the ability for inspectors to be able to visit a branch, and upon their visit, they can submit their findings using an inspection form. And when they make that submission, each branch manager of that location will be able to see inspections just that pertain to their specific location. Okay, so it's an ability for a rep in the field to go inspect the property, make those submissions based on their findings, and that location manager is going to be able to see those findings later and what they need to fix. Okay, so that's the application we're building today. And I didn't build too many data pages because the bulk of today's training session is to focus primarily on table structure, because our application is going to have some complex cascading drop-downs and lookup tables to be able to associate an inspection with that particular branch. Okay, and as always, today's video is going to be recorded and available on our website later at the end of the day. So if you want to watch this video on your own time and your own pace, you're welcome to do that. And let me give you a live example of what we're going to be building today. So I do thank you for stopping me midway. I didn't realize that my line was muted. So let me give you the live example now. I'm going to go ahead and log out. And I have set up 3 tabs across my web template. I have the Inspectors tab. And you can see I have some basic navigation links here. So if I log in as the inspector, and once logged in, I can go directly to the new inspection. So let's say I'm at the specific location. Here's my inspection form, okay? And up here in the very first drop-down, which I made a required field, I can select the branch name. So if I'm at this location from Branchville, I can select that. Now there's some functionality that's happening here, but I'm not exposing it. It's actually hidden, but I have a few more drop-downs here that are being hidden at the moment, but it's cascading based on my selection of this particular branch. Okay, because as an inspector, I don't need to see that information. All I'm really interested in seeing is the branch name once I'm at that location. So let me make one submission here. So let's say no concerns, NA. And this particular form, the majority of this form is to have drop-downs to select the answers. And the first option is I put not applicable because this location might not need to have this answered, for example. Okay, Branchville may not be, might not have a showroom, for example. So I left it not applicable, but as you can see in the drop-down, I can select yes, no, no response, depending on the location, right? So is there a showroom associated with this branch? So let's say yes. Is it free from any visible hazards? And you can say no. And then you go down the list of all of your other questions. So let me make a few selections here. No, just some random selections. And then you at the very end, you can select the date of your submission. So when you inspected that location, click submit, and your submission was successful. And then you can go to view past inspections, and here you can search all the inspections for all the branches. And if I leave this as null value or search all, then you can see all of the prior inspections as an inspector. You should be able to do that. And I know my line was muted, but as I said, there are plenty of ways to slice and dice the data and how you wish to have this presented. This is the report that I chose, but of course you can include additional columns, you can exclude columns, and then at the end you can go to details as the inspector. Now I didn't continue to modify this because it would have taken a little bit longer and because we only have 1 hour. So I made a few fields editable, but here I can select if this belongs to a different branch. Let's say I made a mistake and this inspection really belongs to this branch, I can reassign it. And then down below I can edit all of the information that I posted as the inspector. Okay, so once that inspection is submitted, the branch manager of that location should be able to log in. And let me log in as Jesse at nbc.com and password is test. And once I log in as Jesse, or the branch manager of this location, I can see all of the inspections submitted by this inspector, Phil Ivey. I can see when the inspection was made, and then I can go to details. Actually, let's see what was the latest one. Today is Oh, I selected the date. So let's go maybe with the 16th, this one here. Click details. And as a branch manager, I'm only able to read the data. I don't have the ability to make changes to those inspections. But I'm responsible for taking care of whatever the inspector finds. So if they find that there's no first aid kit on site, I got to make sure I fix that. So next time, on the next inspection date, they can review that and they can make those changes as the inspector. Now again, I didn't really make any changes to the labels because that's a little bit time consuming, and we're not going to focus on that today. It's just primarily on the functionality. And I did not build anything for the admin, because once you have this setup completed, the ability to submit inspections, view inspections, all the other data pages will be fairly easy to build. There's nothing complex about it, because now the admin, when you log in as the admin, you can manage inspectors, you can manage managers, you can also see all the inspections across all the branches, and those data pages are fairly easy to set up. Okay, so let's go inside our Caspio account. And as you can see that I have built only 3 data pages for this specific application. So I'm going to build a new app, blank app, and let's call this just branch inspect. Click finish. Okay, so there's my app, 0 data pages, and let's click on open. And of course it's a blank slate, so we have to build all of our objects, and as I always mention, you always want to start on the table level. And I usually like to build my foundation first, which is the employee table or the user table. So let's do that. Let's click on new table. And then I'm going to add all of my fields that pertain to all of my employees. So for example, user ID, that's going to be an auto number to auto populate, because every user needs to have a specific ID. Then we'll have employee name. I'm also going to add email, which is going to be unique. Password. So these are all the standard fields that you would have inside your table for your employees or your users. And then we have the admin level. That's going to be identified as a checkbox. Then we also want to have branch manager. That's also going to be a checkbox. And then we have inspector, who will have their own account. And last but not least, I usually like to add status. Status allows the admin to allow who can log into the account and who cannot log into the account. If you are joining us for the first time today and this is unfamiliar territory for you and you're not sure what we're doing, please attend my Monday through Wednesday session because we go in more depth as far as how we set up user tables and why we select checkboxes for each one of the user roles. Okay, so let's go ahead and click on save, and let's call this employees table, little t. Click finish. And let's open this table and let's list a few employees because I'm going to need some example employees here in my application to make sure everything works correctly. So we'll say Walter White, walter@abc.com, password can be test. We'll make him the admin and also give him status to be able to log in. You can see how the auto number populates. Let's also do Jesse Pinkman, jesse@abc.com, password would be test. And all I need is 3 of these, so we'll say status checked. And last but not least, we'll have Amy White, and let's say amy@abc.com. Again, password is test. And you can have as many employees as you'd like inside this table, and we'll make Amy the inspector and give her access to the account. Okay, so this is your basic user table. Of course, you may have additional branch managers, you may have additional admins and additional inspectors inside this table. Just make sure you populate the table with all of your employees and users. Okay, so that's one table. The second table that I'm going to build, which is going to be our lookup table of all the branches, and this is going to be an important table later on when we create that cascading drop-down field. So here we have a branch ID. We also want branch name, and the branch ID, I'm going to make that an auto number. And we'll also have phone number of the branch and also all the other information you wish to collect for that specific branch. Address, city, state, zip. And I also want branch manager, and I also want manager ID, which is going to be a number. Okay, and you will see how this later on comes into play. I'm going to explain a little bit more in depth once I add one location now to my table. I'm going to click on save, and I'm going to call this branch lookup. Okay, so if you look at the employees table, we know that my branch manager is Jesse Pinkman. Okay, so that's my branch manager, and his user ID is number 2. In my lookup table, I'm going to list a branch here, and we're going to say Branchville, phone number something random, address Easy Street, Mountain View, California, zip code. And keep in mind that you don't have to actually add all this information inside a table directly. You could later on create a form for an admin to be able to add a new branch location to this table. Okay, so I'm just manually putting this inside a table for now. The branch manager of this location, Branchville, is going to be Jesse Pinkman, and his ID or his user ID is 2 from my employees table. But I made this manager ID because I wanted to have a different field name. That way, if I've named this user ID, it's going to be too complicated, or it's going to be too similar to my other field. Okay, so just keep in mind that this branch manager, his ID is number 2, and that's his name. And then if you look at the employees table, you'll see that user ID, which really is the manager ID in the other table, is 2, and then we have Jesse Pinkman over here. Okay, and he's the branch manager of that location. Okay, so hopefully that's not too overwhelming. And the last table, which is really going to be the main table, which is going to contain all of those questions in the inspection form. This is going to have the bulk of all of your fields. Okay, and the important fields that you'll need is the inspection ID, because every new inspection I would like to give it an ID. Okay, so every inspection that comes in has its own unique number. Then we have the branch name, and this branch name here is going to be pulled from our branches table, because we made that the lookup table. Okay, because we have the branch name Branchville inside that table. We also want branch ID, and branch ID we also have from the branches lookup table. Okay, and then we want employee name, and the employee name is going to be stamped from our employee table. Okay, so when inspector, who is Amy, submits this inspection, we can stamp her name from the employee table. And I also want to stamp the user ID of that employee. Okay, and that's going to be a number. And I'm sorry, the branch ID also needs to be a number as well. And then you also need to have a branch manager and the manager ID is going to be a number. And this is being pulled from the branches lookup table. Okay, it's because we have that information inside that branches table. Okay, so a little bit complex here in terms of how we're going to associate this inspection with each one of these locations. So again, let me walk you through it one more time. Branch name and branch ID, if you look at the live example for the inspectors, new inspection, these names are being pulled from the lookup table. So that's the branch name. Okay, all of these fields that you're seeing here are also in this submission form, but I made them hidden. Okay, you're not seeing it, but it's really it's behind the scenes. It's taking action. So then, based on the branch name, it's going to cascade and select the branch ID from our lookup table. And these two fields are just going to be stamped based on our employee table. And then down below, we have the branch manager name, Jesse Pinkman, and his ID from the lookup table. And we're going to stamp that information inside the inspections table. Okay, and now let's list a few of these fields that we need as far as questions. So summary, primary, summary, secondary. These are the concerns, and then we can make these text 64,000 because they're going to need to type in more data. And to save time, I'm only going to list 1 or 2 more questions here for the inspections form, but just keep in mind you have to add all of your fields or all of your questions inside this form. So what I'm going to do here is say showroom associated, and this is later on going to be a drop down, and then we'll say showroom associated, we'll say room free hazards. And keep in mind that when you're building it inside a table, your field names, this only gives you a specific number of characters you can add to the field name. Okay, this is just for reference so you know what that field is about. You can also put your label here, or when you build a data page, inside a data page you can rename this to your actual label, what it's going to say, because some questions are going to be a little bit lengthy. Okay, and let's have two more questions here. So we'll have fire extinguisher. Hopefully I didn't butcher that spelling. And then we'll say propane tank, something like that. And again, all of these are going to be drop downs primarily, okay, except for these two fields at the top. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click on save to save my table, and then let's add one more field, which is date submitted. That's an important one, date submitted, and that'll be a date and time field. Click on save, and let's call this inspections, little t for table. And I am going to need one more table, which is going to be a simple lookup table for all of those drop downs. If you look at my submission form, because this is going to be used across many questions, I created a quick lookup table to give me all of these answers. Okay, but I have a little trick that I did here, and I'm going to show you what I'm doing here. So let's click on new table, and let's call this status, and we're going to click on save, and let's call the table status lookup. Finish. And let's add those options to my table. So we said we have yes, no, and no response. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and click on tables to save that. You're probably wondering, how come I didn't include my not applicable option as the drop-down? Well, I added this as a custom value inside the data page wizard, and I will show you why in a minute, only because I want this to be selected by default, and if I put it inside my table, I won't have that ability. So let's go back to, now that we have all of our tables built, all the needed tables for this application, now because we have three levels of users, we have the inspectors, we have the branch managers, we have the admin, we have to build our three views that are going to filter each one of our user roles. So this is going to be, I'm going to do this really quickly here. So admin, employees table. Admin already exists, so let me give it something else. Admin view. And we're going to filter this view based on the admin checkbox and based on status. And we're going to click on finish. And then we're going to build another view for the branch managers based on the same table. And that's branch managers. And make sure status is checked as well. Oops. Finish. And one more. Inspectors. Employee table. And that's based on the inspectors and status. And click finish. And I think I have a question here. Let me take a look. Let's see here. Yeah, I can do that. So can you hear me okay now? Is this a little better? Okay, I'll see if I can speak a little bit louder as well, so you can hear me. Okay, so now we have our views built. And then, of course, when you build the views, you also need to build your authentications for each one of your user roles. So we're going to go to authentications. And let's do this really quickly here. So we select the admin view first, custom, and then we'll say email. And click on create. And we'll call this admin A for authentication. And let's build two more, branch managers. So let's say branch managers, custom, email, create. And one more. Inspectors, custom, email, create. Okay, so now we've laid out the foundation. We have all of our tables built that we'll need for this application. We have all of our views and we have all of our authentications. Now let's go to data pages and let's start working on this application. And before I do that, I always build my folders. So let's build our folder for the admin role, branch managers, and inspectors. Now this application is actually going to have one more user level, which is department manager, but because I don't have the time to do that, just want to explain that inside the employee table, add one more user role here for department manager and also build an additional view and additional authentication for that specific user role. And under data pages, you're going to create 4 folders instead of 3. So you'll have admin, branch manager, department manager, and also inspectors. Or you can keep it like this if you feel that really the branch manager should be able to see all the information without having the ability for department managers. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Okay, so I know the first thing that I want to build, and let me just double check my table here. Give me 1 second, make sure I have a lookup. Okay, so I did add one here, Jesse Pinkman. Okay, good. So let's go back to data pages. And the first data page I'm going to build is for the inspectors to be able to submit an inspection. Okay, so you're going to build a new data page, and you're going to select submission form, and you're going to select the inspections table, because that's where all the inspections are going to be stored. You select that. Let's call this new inspection form, and I'm going to apply one of my styles here. How about this one here? And in this case, you don't have to enable advanced options, but if you wanted to create multiple columns and some more advanced functionality, you can do so. And I do need to restrict access based on my inspector authentication, the one that we just built based on the view. Okay, so we click next. You're going to see all of your fields are now available for selection. You're going to move them all to the right. And then right over here is where we have that configuration based on the cascading dropdown. You can see in my live example, there's only one visible field, that one dropdown. So let's go ahead and set this up. So the first thing we're going to do, instead of a text field, we're going to have a dropdown here. And we're going to say both for lookup tables and custom values. And the reason why we do both is because I want the ability to see this option as my first option. Okay. So then what we'll do is we'll say select branch, delete the value because you're not really selecting this, and make this field required, so the inspector has to fill this in. Okay. And then the lookup table, remember we have a lookup table for our branches, so there's the branch lookup like this, and what I want to be able to display is the branch name, and field for value is branch name. Okay, so when I'm storing the inspection, it's recording it as the actual branch name. And then the second field, so again, this is the dropdown. The second field is going to be a cascading dropdown, which is going to cascade based on this field. So the parent field is the branch name. Parent field usually means one above it. And then what you're going to do is you're going to look at your branch lookup table, filter based on branch name, but now field for display is going to be the actual ID, the branch ID. So now I'm storing the branch name and I'm storing the branch ID based on my branch lookup table. Okay. Feel free to pause me here if you have any questions. The employee name, all we're going to do with this is we're going to make this field hidden because we have this information from our user table or our employee table, so we're going to hidden. We're going to use the authenticated field and we're going to select employee name. Okay, same thing for user ID. We're going to hide this field, authenticated field, and we're going to use the user ID. And then the last two fields, branch manager is going to be a cascading dropdown. It's going to cascade based on branch name. Okay, and then you're going to say same lookup table, branch lookup, filter based on branch name up here. And then you're going to select the branch manager's name based on that branch name. Okay, so again, we have that lookup table. We have all this information inside that lookup table. All we're doing is setting up the cascading dropdowns based on my selection of the branch. It's going to populate all of these cascading dropdowns. And then last but not least, we have the manager ID. Again, cascading dropdown based on, well, you can either choose this one or this one. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to select branch name, and then we're going to have the branch name as the lookup table, and filter based on branch manager, if you like. And field for display is going to be manager ID, and field for value is going to be manager ID. Okay, so based on the branch manager or branch name, it's up to you. Both of them are going to give you that same ID, okay, because there's one-to-one. So that's the cascading dropdown. Now before I set up these other fields here, I want to click finish and make sure this is working properly. So we're going to click finish, and we're going to click on preview, and let's log in as Jesse at abc.com, and password is test. Or maybe it's not. Let me take a look at my table. Oh, actually it's Amy. Amy is the inspector. Sorry about that. So let's go with Amy. At least we know the login screen works the way it's supposed to. abc.com, test. And there is my submission form. Okay, so now what should happen is if I select a particular branch, and I did not set up this correctly, so it's setting up the branch ID, the branch manager's name, and this needs to also, I believe, needs to be based on the branch name. So let's go back to our data page, click on edit. I had a feeling that was going to be the case. So let's go back to our configuration screen. So the branch manager ID, instead of branch manager, you're still looking up the same lookup table. You want to select branch name. Okay, so it has to be based on the branch name. Finish. Refresh. Okay, so let me select the branch, and there we go. Okay, so now it's set up correctly. So now when you make the submission for this inspection, it's going to be stored for this branch ID, and this is the branch manager, and also the manager ID. It's going to be stored inside the inspections table. Okay, so let's now configure the rest of these fields so you can see what that looks like as well. So let's click on edit. Click next. And then we have, let's say, primary. We know this is going to be a text area. This is also going to be a text area. Showroom associated. So these are the yes and no drop downs, no response, and not applicable. So let's make one drop down here. And I want both custom values and lookup table. And the reason why is because I want the first option to say not applicable, so that the inspector doesn't really have to change that if it's not applicable. Okay, so what we're going to say is not applicable or applicable, and then you click on this little check icon, and that means that when that drop down or when that form is opened up, it's always going to default to this option for you. And then our lookup table, we select our lookup table for status, which has those three additional options: yes, no, and no response. Okay, so it's up to you which one you want this to be defaulted to. I felt that it was not applicable, or you can also have no response. That might also make sense too, but this is the way I've set it up. And then you can go down the list of all of your other drop downs, and you can set them up the same way. Drop down, both, not applicable, defaulted to, and then the lookup table is going to be the status lookup. And I'm going to stop here. So let's click finish. And let me take a look at my form. And there we go. We have those two text areas, and then we have these drop downs. And you can see how immediately it's defaulted to not applicable, as opposed to any of these other options. Okay, and it's being, these three options are being pulled from that lookup table. So you can mix and match custom values and lookup tables if you'd like. Okay, you can add cool things like sections inside your form. Just so I can show you a quick example. If you do get familiar with a little bit of HTML, you can make things really, really nice. So if I add an HTML block, let's say above here, and if you just write it out maybe as div style equals background color, and I'll explain what I'm doing here in just a second when I'm done putting in all my, and let's say we go with one of the ones that I usually use is this one here, and then we'll say padding 5 pixels, and then we'll create a quick heading. Let's just use a random one like H10 style equals, how about font family that I normally use is Arial Sans, and we'll do this. And this is actually fairly easy, even though it might seem really complicated what I'm doing here as far as HTML. This is actually pretty easy. And once I'm done inputting all the code, I'll explain to you guys exactly what I've done here so it makes sense. I'm almost done here. So let's see, close that, and then we'll just call it summary. And then we'll close the H10 tag for our header and also the div. Okay, so hopefully this is going to look okay. So let me click finish here. And let's refresh. And you can see that I made a mistake somewhere. So I basically just created a blue background, and I have a heading inside which is just a label which is supposed to be white. Let me see what I made a mistake here somewhere. Always have to double check your work. Div style, background color, that's that, padding, H10 style, font family, color, font size, 14 pixels, style. Ah, thank you. Good catch. Okay, there we go. So hopefully that was the mistake, and we'll find out in just a second. Color is right, font size is right, summary, H10 div, style, font family. All right, let's see if that gives us what we want. So we'll go ahead and finish here. Refresh. And why is the color? I mean, the Arial is now right, but my color is coming out still black, which is kind of odd. So let me see here. I'm just going to spend one more second on this. If I don't get it right, then I made a mistake somewhere. Color, number, FFF. But we just use 3 of them just to be safe. Ah, I didn't close this. Here, let's close it. And as always, HTML is a little bit tricky because there's so many semicolons, quotes, and whatnot that it's going to affect the look. And again, okay, so I'll have to double check my work. I guess I'm missing something. So I'll figure out later what I'm doing wrong here, but that's very strange. It's kind of bugging me. But anyway, so basically what you can do from here is you can just copy this and you can insert it all around your form if you like, above your summary, actually above showroom. So let's insert another HTML block. We can paste that code and we can call this showroom. And then later on we can insert another one above propane, and we'll paste that code there and we'll say propane. Just a nice way to section things off inside the form. Well, it should be 3 will be just enough, but I can add 6 is usually the number. FFF, that's how many it takes. Color. I know it's some kind of a silly mistake that I'm not seeing here. So I'm gonna let's see the form. Let's preview it now. Let's take a look. Alright, so you can see those sections, how we create that inside. And if you look at my live example, we have those sections right there, although this is white, go figure, the one that I did yesterday, and this one I can't figure out now. But anyway, so let's move on since we don't have too much more time. So let's go back to our data pages. And now that this main form is built and now you can submit the inspection, you can also build a data page for the inspectors to be able to review those inspections. And for that, actually before I build the second data page, let's deploy this one. So let me exit this and let's click on the deploy link. And let's grab this code. And I have my sample page set up here, so that's called, not this one, it's new inspection. So here's my placeholder, and we're gonna go ahead and paste that code there. And now I'm going to go refresh and go to new inspection, and there's the form just deployed on the web. Okay, and now the inspector can go in, after they've logged in, they can now submit this inspection. And you can see how we have, upon my selection, these are being selected. Now, how do we actually make these fields hidden? Because the inspector doesn't need to see that. See, in my live example, it's happening, but it's actually hidden. So let's go ahead and edit our form. And this is actually a fairly easy HTML thing that you have to add inside it. So the branch name, we're going to keep that exposed. We're not going to hide this. This is the main dropdown. So you're going to insert an HTML block above the branch ID, and then you're just going to write it out really simply. Table style equals display none, like this. And then you're going to close your table after this field. So we're going to insert one more HTML block to wrap those fields, and we're going to close our table tag. Okay, so just this simple table here is going to hide all of these fields in between those two tables. So let's click finish, refresh, and now those fields are hidden. Okay, but they're still going on in behind the scenes. We're just not able to see them. Okay. All right, so now let's build that second data page, that report that allows us to view the inspections as the inspector. So we're going to build a new data page. And everybody here should know how to build a report by now, so I'm going to just breeze through this. We're going to select report, tabular format based on the inspections table. We're going to apply our style, and let's call this view past inspections. Restrict access based on the inspector authentication. And you can have the ability to search if you'd like. You do not need to set up record level security because the inspectors should be able to see all the inspections. And let's search based on branch name. And we're going to have just one field. And I'm going to just make it contains for now, although you could make it a drop down if you'd like. And on the results page, I want to see the branch name, date submitted. I'm not going to make any changes here. We're going to show 25 inspections. You could also allow the inspector to delete inspections. You may want to just have maybe an admin do that if you like. Click next. Enable the details view, and in the details page you can show everything. And of course now you have to go through each one of these fields and make it editable. I'm just going to make, well, not these fields. Maybe the branch name can be reassigned to somebody else. Like the summary, I'll make that a text area, and also this, make it a text area. But you do have to go through each one of your fields here and configure your drop-downs again, unfortunately, because this is a separate data page. And even though you made those changes on the actual submission form, all these drop-downs, you will have to do it on the details page for the inspectors if you want them to be able to edit. Finish, and now I'm going to go ahead and deploy this to a page that I called it index. So that's actually on my home page. It's not really the best naming convention, but does the job. So here's my index page. Let me refresh. So you can search based on branch name, and there are no records found. Did we make a submission? So let's make one submission from Branchville here, and summary new submission, NA, no, fire extinguisher, yes, propane tank, yes, no, date submitted, today's date, click submit. Let's check the view past submissions, and there's that submission that we selected or we submitted on the 16th. And then you can go to details, and here, as long as you configure the details view, you can edit all of your prior inputs. Okay, so now let's set up the branches. So as a branch manager, I want to be able to see just my own inspections that belong to my branch. So then what we're going to do is go to the branches folder, build a new data page, and we're going to build a report, tabular format. And then the table that you need, does anybody want to take a wild guess what table we need here? Actually, it's pretty easy. It's the inspections table because that's where all the inspections are stored. So let's say we call this view, call it my inspections for the branch managers, and then we'll apply our style. And you can enable advanced options if you'd like. And now you need to restrict access based on the branch manager authentication, because this belongs to the branch managers. So we click next. You can have the search form, and now it's very important to set up record level security. Okay, so you enable this checkbox, and then what you're going to do is you're going to apply the user ID of the employee. Okay, and then from here you need the manager ID, because the inspections table is storing the manager ID based on the branch lookup table, and the employee's name, that's the user ID for Jesse, who is ID number 2 in the employees table, and the inspection table is storing Jesse's ID as number 2 as well. So as long as these two are matching, Jesse's going to be able to see just inspections for that particular branch. And now you can see why I called the manager ID, because if I call the user ID, since I already have the user ID in that table, I had to call it something else. That way it's you can distinguish that from the user ID itself. Okay, so let's click next here, and let's give the manager's ability to search based on maybe date submitted of that inspection. And then what we're going to do is set up a quick date range. So we're going to add new criteria, and criteria 1 is going to be greater than or equal to date submitted from, and date submitted to, and this is going to be less than or equal to. And then on the results page, as the branch manager, I want to be able to see what date submitted maybe. Let's see, anything else? Submitted by, which was the employee name. And I want to move the submitted by at the top here, and we're going to call this label inspector name maybe. Date submitted, and then we're going to enable the details page. And in the details page, I want to be able to see more information. So I want to be able to see inspector's name. I don't need to see branch manager because that's me, and I want to be able to see all the other information about that inspection. Okay, so I'm going to rename the employee name to inspector name, and we're going to keep everything display only, because the branch manager shouldn't be able to edit this information unless given that right. So let's click finish, and let's deploy this data page to our page that we call b.html, and let's check it out. So let's refresh, and let's log in as Jesse. And as soon as you log in, we have that nice date range that we just created. We can click search, and there's that inspection, and the inspector's name is Amy White. I can go to details, and now I can see what the inspection was all about, what Amy submitted. So now as the branch manager, I would know that, okay, well, I need to work on this. This is the focus area. Of course, you can have lookup tables here as well to be able to change the status. So let's say based on your application need, the inspector says this needs to be changed by this date, and we can say the status now is, let's say the status is incomplete, and I will be able to see the incomplete. And now as the branch manager, I can assign that task to somebody in my department or in my branch. They work on it, and if it's completed, we mark it as complete, the status change. And now on the next annual visit, the inspector can review that, and they can see that it was changed, and now their next inspection will say yes or no depending on if that was done correctly. Okay, so there are plenty of ways to set this application up, but this is really the bulk of today's training session, is just to show you how we can set up those lookup tables in order to assign specific items to specific locations, and then that location login can review those inspections that were assigned to their specific branch. This concept can be applied to many different types of apps. This is just using it in one way. So I do hope today's session was pretty helpful. This was a customer request, and hopefully you can take away from today's session and apply it to your own work in anything that you're looking to build. And now we're going to open up the line for any questions, and you can submit them using audio, or you can also submit the question using the chat window. If you decide to leave, I thank you again for joining today's session. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you again in our future sessions.